When you stop worrying, everything falls into place. Montaigne's wisdom. What if I told you that the key to living a better, freer, and more joyful life isn't about working harder, thinking deeper, or even solving your problems, but about letting go? That sounds like a paradox, right? We're trained from childhood to believe that control equals safety, that if we just worry enough, plan enough, stress enough, anticipate enough, we can somehow cushion ourselves against the chaos of life. But Michel de Montaigne, the 16th century French philosopher who might have been the world's first modern thinker, saw this obsession with control for what it really is: a trap. A trap we willingly step into again and again, mistaking anxiety for preparation and fear for wisdom. Montaigne didn't write to impress kings or theologians, he wrote to understand himself. He locked himself in a tower filled with books and began his essays with one mission: to observe his own life honestly. And in doing so, he discovered something revolutionary. He realized that most of our suffering doesn't come from the world itself. It comes from how we think about the world, from the stories we tell ourselves, the expectations we cling to, and the relentless voice in our heads that says, "You're not ready yet. You're not safe yet. You haven't done enough."
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Think about this. How much of your day is spent rehearsing future disasters that never happen? How much of your energy is locked in mental simulations of conversations, catastrophes, rejections, and regrets? We imagine we're being responsible, but Montaigne would ask, at what cost? When you spend your life worrying about what might go wrong, aren't you already living in a future that doesn't exist? Who taught us that worry is a currency we must pay to earn peace? Montaigne's genius wasn't in offering answers, it was in asking better questions. He pushed us to examine our habits of thought, to look at our lives not as problems to be solved, but as experiences to be lived. He believed that when we stop trying to control everything, when we stop clinging to certainties, something extraordinary happens. Life starts to flow, not because the universe suddenly cooperates, but because we do. We stop resisting what is and start dancing with it. Let me give you a visual. Imagine a person in a river, flailing, trying to swim upstream, panicking because they think the current will carry them somewhere dangerous. That's most of us. But now imagine they stop, they breathe, they float. And yes, the river still carries them, but now they're present, they're aware. They notice the sky above, the trees along the bank, the temperature of the water. They haven't escaped the river, they've entered it. Montaigne reminds us that the mind, left unchecked, becomes a tyrant. It invents fears where none exist. It demands guarantees where life offers none. And the more we try to satisfy its endless hunger for control, the more enslaved we become. So he suggests something radical. Instead of fighting the mind, observe it, laugh at it, befriend it. Recognize that your thoughts are not facts, that anxiety is not wisdom, and that uncertainty is not a threat. It's the default condition of being alive. Here's the moment Montaigne really flips the script. He says, "My life has been full of terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened." That might be the most relatable sentence in philosophical history. How many nights have we lost sleep over imagined disasters? How many opportunities have we missed because we worried about outcomes we couldn't predict? And what if the only thing standing between us and peace is the assumption that we need to worry in the first place? The real breakthrough is this: When you stop worrying, you don't become reckless. You become responsive. You start engaging with life as it is, not as you fear it might be. You notice more. You listen more. You laugh more. You're no longer living in a fortress of what-ifs, but in the open field of what is. And in that openness, everything begins to shift. Not because the world changes, but because you do. So here's a question for you. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to control it? If you trusted that you could handle whatever came your way, not because you're invincible, but because you're adaptable? Can you imagine the weight that would lift off your shoulders if you believed, just for a moment, that everything doesn't need to be figured out? That maybe, just maybe, things fall into place not when you plan harder, but when you let go more. The art of uncertainty. Why not knowing is the beginning of wisdom. We spend so much of our lives trying to know, to be sure, to figure it all out. We crave certainty like a starving person craves food. We want clear answers, predictable outcomes, and solid ground beneath our feet. But what if this desire, this desperate need to know, isn't a sign of intelligence but a symptom of fear? What if the real wisdom, the kind Montaigne discovered in his solitude, begins not when we finally understand everything, but when we finally admit that we don't? Montaigne wasn't afraid of not knowing. In fact, he wore his uncertainty like a badge of honor. He famously wrote, "What do I know? Que sais-je?" as a kind of personal motto, not as a sign of doubt in himself, but as a gesture of intellectual humility. He understood that the world is too vast, too complex, too fluid for any one of us to fully grasp it. And instead of being paralyzed by this truth, he found freedom in it, because when you no longer need to pretend you have the answers, you're finally free to ask better questions. Think about how much energy we waste trying to be right. In arguments, in decisions, in our inner monologues, we scramble to protect our beliefs, to defend our images of the world, to hold on to the illusion that we've got it all figured out. But Montaigne reminds us that this is a trap. The ego wants certainty because it wants control, but the soul, your deeper self, doesn't need control. It wants truth, and truth often comes dressed in mystery. In fact, it's in those moments when you don't know what to do, when the path ahead is foggy, when you're forced to pause and feel your way forward, that real growth happens. That's where you become a philosopher. Not in the academic sense, but in the living, breathing sense of the word. A lover of wisdom, not a collector of conclusions, but a seeker of reality as it is, not as you wish it were. Montaigne teaches us that uncertainty is not a weakness to overcome, but a state to embrace. It opens the door to curiosity. It makes space for empathy. It allows us to meet life on its own terms, instead of forcing it into our preconceived boxes. When you live with the awareness that you don't know everything, you become more gentle with yourself and with others. You stop expecting perfection. You stop demanding certainty. And in that surrender, something powerful happens. You start to see the world more clearly. So many of our anxieties come from our refusal to accept uncertainty. We want guarantees in love, in career, in health, in purpose. We want a contract with life that says, if I do this, I get that. But life doesn't work that way. It never has. And the more we try to force it to, the more frustrated we become. But when we follow Montaigne's lead and learn to live in the question instead of rushing to the answer, we begin to taste a different kind of peace. Not the peace of having everything under control, but the peace of not needing to. Here's something to reflect on. What are you pretending to know right now that maybe you don't? And what would happen if you stopped pretending? What space would open up in your life if you allowed yourself to say, "I don't know, and that's okay"? Could that be the beginning of a deeper wisdom? There's a quiet confidence that emerges when you no longer need to appear certain. You become more relaxed, more playful, more present. You stop clenching your fists around life and instead you open your hands. And when your hands are open, not grasping, not controlling, you're finally able to receive, letting go of the illusion of control, how surrender leads to strength. We live under the illusion that we're in control, that if we just plan well enough, work hard enough, anticipate every outcome and prepare for every scenario, we can avoid pain, disappointment, failure. It's almost heroic, this myth of control. We're told it's the mark of a strong person, someone who has life together. But Montaigne, in his quiet, introspective way, saw through this illusion. He understood that control isn't the source of our strength. It's often the source of our suffering, because the tighter we grip reality, the more it slips through our fingers. Let's be honest, how much of what happens in life is truly within our control? We don't get to decide if we're born healthy or sick, into wealth or poverty, into safety or chaos. We don't control the thoughts of others, the movements of the world, the randomness of events. And yet, we act as though we do. We obsess over outcomes. We try to bend the future to our will. We micromanage our lives down to the smallest detail, hoping that if we just get it right, we'll be safe. But Montaigne challenges us to see how exhausting and how futile that really is. He invites us to consider the radical possibility that surrender is not weakness, but wisdom. That letting go isn't giving up, it's finally aligning ourselves with reality. When we stop trying to manipulate life into fitting our narratives, we begin to see it for what it actually is. Unpredictable, wild, sometimes cruel, often beautiful, and always beyond our full comprehension. And if we can meet life on those terms, instead of trying to conquer it, something shifts. We become more resilient, not because we've mastered the chaos, but because we've stopped resisting it. This doesn't mean we stop caring or trying, it means we stop forcing. It means we do what we can, honestly and fully, and then we release our attachment to the outcome. It means we show up for life, not as engineers building a perfect machine, but as surfers riding a vast, ever-changing wave. Control is brittle. It breaks under pressure, but surrender is fluid. It adapts, it flows, it responds. That's the kind of strength Montaigne practiced, not the strength of domination, but the strength of acceptance. One of the most powerful things Montaigne teaches us is that we don't need to fix everything. Some things aren't problems to be solved, they're truths to be lived with. The aging of the body, the unpredictability of death, the limits of knowledge, the unreliability of human emotion, these aren't glitches in the system, they are the system. And when we stop fighting them, we stop suffering. Not because the pain disappears, but because we stop adding resistance to it. We stop saying, "This shouldn't be happening," and start asking, "How can I live with this in a way that honors my humanity?" So ask yourself, what are you trying to control right now that might be controlling you? What are you gripping so tightly that it's cutting off your ability to breathe? Can you loosen your hold just a little? Can you trust that life has its own rhythm, one that doesn't always align with your plans, but that might still carry you somewhere meaningful if you let it. When we surrender our need for control, we make room for something else. Presence. We stop living in the future, in the realm of hypotheticals, and we return to the only place we've ever truly been, the present moment. And in that moment we find not certainty, but clarity, not dominance, but peace, not fear, but freedom. Living lightly. How embracing impermanence unlocks joy. There's a kind of weight we carry without even realizing it, the weight of permanence, the belief that what we have, what we know, who we are, should last, that joy should stay, that love should never change, that success once gained should be preserved forever. And yet, life refuses to obey these desires. Everything changes. People leave, bodies age, moments slip through our hands. Montaigne understood this with rare clarity, and rather than resisting it, he leaned into it. He saw that impermanence wasn't a flaw in the design of life, it was the design. And when we accept that, we don't become morbid or nihilistic. We become light. To live lightly doesn't mean living carelessly. It doesn't mean detaching from meaning or avoiding commitment. It means carrying life like a traveler, not a property owner. It means loving without clinging, acting without obsessing over results, and finding joy in what is, not in what you expect it to be. Montaigne reminds us that the more we try to freeze life into something solid, the more brittle it becomes. Only by embracing the flow, the coming and going of things, can we actually appreciate them while they're here. Think about the last time you experienced something beautiful. A conversation, a sunset, a moment of laughter with someone you love. Part of what made it beautiful was that it didn't last. If it were always available, always there, it would become invisible. We are wired to notice the fleeting, to be moved by what's temporary. And yet, we keep trying to make things permanent. We try to immortalize moments, people, identities. But, Montaigne would ask, why not just live them fully instead? When we accept impermanence, we stop trying to preserve life and start participating in it. We stop holding back joy for fear it might disappear. We stop hesitating to love because love might end. We stop waiting for the perfect moment because we realize that this moment is the only one we're guaranteed. This is what Montaigne means when he says that to philosophize is to learn how to die, not in a morbid way, but in the most life-affirming way possible. To live with death in mind is to live with clarity. It strips away what's trivial. It sharpens what matters. It invites us to ask again and again, if nothing lasts, what is truly worth my time, my energy, my heart? And here's the secret. When you stop needing things to last forever, they actually become more precious. The morning coffee, the hug from your child, the sound of rain. These small, passing things become sacred, not because they are grand, but because they are real. And when you live with this awareness, you begin to feel joy not as a rare reward, but as the natural consequence of being present. You stop chasing high points and start noticing the richness of the ordinary. So pause just for a moment and ask yourself, what are you afraid to lose? And how is that fear shaping the way you experience it now? What relationships, experiences, or dreams are you clinging to so tightly that you've forgotten how to enjoy them? Can you breathe into the truth that nothing lasts? and in doing so make space to love what is without needing it to be more. Montaigne's wisdom is not about withdrawal from the world, it's about deepening your relationship with it. It's about realizing that when you stop worrying, when you stop needing to hold life so tightly, you finally start to feel it. And in that feeling, there's freedom, there's lightness, there's joy. So maybe the question isn't, how can I make life last? Maybe the real question is, how can I live so fully that impermanence no longer feels like a threat, but like a gift? That's when everything falls into place.